August 6th, 1945, 8:15 in the morning. Location: the city of Hiroshima, Japan. Event: the first nuclear attack in human history. In a single blinding flash, an entire city ceased to exist. A bomb called Little Boy, dropped by the United States, claimed the lives of approximately 140,000 people. This is not a story. This is real history.
In the middle of the 20th century, humanity was witnessing an unprecedented spectacle of destruction. A catastrophic fire known as the Second World War had engulfed the entire world. From the vast plains of Europe to the deserts of Africa, from the dense jungles of Asia to the turbulent waters of the Pacific Ocean, everywhere there raged a struggle for power, a clash of ideologies, and a bloody carnival of death. By 1945, with Germany's fall and Hitler's suicide, the war in Europe had gone silent. But over the skies of the East, the dark clouds of war still hung heavy. Japan, stubborn, indomitable, and somewhat reckless, was still fighting alone against the Allied forces. They believed in Bushido, the warrior's code, that death was more honorable than surrender. Every Japanese citizen, man, woman, child, and elderly alike, had seemingly transformed into a soldier. Their belief was that sacrificing one's life for Emperor Hirohito was the highest religious duty. But against this unyielding spirit stood a harsh reality. Years of continuous war had shattered Japan's economy. Industrial production had nearly fallen to zero, and due to America's naval blockade, the supply of food, oil, and daily necessities had almost completely stopped. Yet they refused to surrender.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, American scientists were working on a terrifying secret in the deserts of New Mexico: the Manhattan Project, a massive undertaking to create the most powerful and destructive weapon in human history. The success of this project would not only bring an end to the Second World War, but would also determine the course of global politics for generations to come. A new era was about to begin, and its first footsteps would be heard over the skies of two Japanese cities. The summer of 1945 was a daily struggle for the ordinary people of Japan. Great cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya were being reduced to rubble under the incendiary bombs dropped by American B-29 bombers. The night skies turned red with licking flames. Japanese homes, built of wood, would burn to ash in moments. Millions were left homeless and bereaved. Seeing the terrible condition of the larger cities, residents of mid-sized cities like Hiroshima considered themselves somewhat fortunate. Hiroshima was an important military and industrial center. The headquarters of Japan's Second Army was located there, and its port was vital for transporting troops and military supplies. Yet, despite its strategic importance, Hiroshima had so far been spared from major air raids. The reason was a secret American plan. Hiroshima was being kept intact to test the effectiveness of a new weapon. Life in the city, viewed from the outside, might have appeared normal, but inside there was a suppressed fear and scarcity. Food rationing had reached such a point that the amount of rice allocated to adults was far below what was needed. People grew sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and vegetables in their courtyards, in park fields, and even along roadsides. Children suffered from malnutrition. Schools had been converted into small factories where students manufactured military equipment.
August 6th, 1945. For Hiroshima, the day had begun like any other ordinary morning. As dawn broke, the city's people had set out for work. Children were heading to school, though their main task that day was to help tear down buildings in the city center to create fire breaks, so that in the event of an air raid, fire would not spread rapidly. What a cruel irony. Their effort to protect against fire was being made, while a fire 1,000,000 times more terrifying waited for them.
At 7:09 in the morning, an American aircraft appeared on Japan's radar system. It was a weather reconnaissance plane called the Straight Flush, whose mission was to observe the weather over Hiroshima and relay information to the main bomber. The sharp wail of sirens shook the entire city. People rushed to shelters. Air raid warnings were broadcast on the radio, but a short while later, the plane circled over the city and flew away, and the Japanese authorities concluded it was a routine mission. Thinking the danger had passed, the all-clear siren was sounded at 7:31 in the morning. People emerged from the shelters and returned to their daily routines. They did not know that this sense of relief was merely the calm before a terrifying storm. Nearly 45 minutes later, 3 more American aircraft entered the skies over Hiroshima. This time, no siren sounded. The people below thought they were perhaps harmless planes, like the one before. Some looked up at the sky with curiosity. The aircraft were flying above 30,000 feet, well beyond the reach of Japan's anti-aircraft guns at the time. Among these 3 aircraft, one was named the Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, who had named the plane after his mother. In its bomb bay slept a monster, a nuclear bomb called Little Boy, weighing more than 4 tons. At 8:15 and 17 seconds in the morning, the bomb was released from the Enola Gay, with the Aoi Bridge at the center of Hiroshima as the target. A fall of 43 seconds, breathtaking and final. In those 43 seconds, hundreds of thousands of people in Hiroshima were living the last moments of their lives, completely unaware. Someone was perhaps embracing their child. Someone sat at their office desk, working. Someone was laughing and joking with friends. Little Boy detonated at 1,900 feet above the ground. First came an intense, unbearable light. Witnesses described it as if 1,000 suns had descended to Earth simultaneously. Those who looked directly toward the explosion had their retinas permanently burned away. Along with the light came devastating heat. At the center of the explosion, the temperature reached several million degrees Celsius. Surface temperatures reached between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees Celsius. In this heat, almost every person within 1.5 kilometers of the explosion's epicenter was vaporized in an instant. No trace of them remained. Only their permanent shadows, seared into walls and stones, silent witnesses to that horrific moment. After the heat came the supersonic shockwave, the force of the blast. Moving at nearly 1,200 kilometers per hour, this wall of wind sent concrete buildings tumbling like houses of cards. Within 2 kilometers of the explosion, approximately 90% of all buildings were completely destroyed. Glass windows shattered and became deadly projectiles, piercing human bodies like bullets. 80,000 people in the city center died within the first few seconds. Those who survived were in horrific condition. Their skin had been scorched and hung from their bodies in long ribbons. Clothing had melted and fused to their flesh. All around was only the sound of screaming, crying, and the silence of death. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a 23-year-old engineer who had come to Hiroshima on business. At the time of the explosion, he was stepping off a tram. He had spotted a plane in the sky and 2 parachutes. A split second later, a blinding flash seared his eyes. The blast threw him into the air. When he regained consciousness, he found the left side of his body severely burned and his eardrums ruptured. Yamaguchi crawled his way to a shelter. All around him, what he witnessed was a living vision of hell, charred bodies, scattered limbs, and countless people writhing in agony as they awaited death. About 30 minutes after the explosion, something strange began to fall from the massive mushroom cloud that had formed above the city, a peculiar rain. The droplets were large, sticky, and black. It became known as black rain. It was not ordinary rain. The explosion had mixed dust, ash, and deadly radioactive particles into the atmosphere, and this combination produced the rain. Those who, parched with thirst, drank this rainwater, or whose wounds were soaked by it, became victims of terrible radiation. This radiation would go on to cause the deaths of thousands more people in the days,
months, and years that followed. By afternoon, Hiroshima had turned into a moving crematorium. Fires burned everywhere, coalescing into a massive firestorm. As the fire consumed the oxygen from the air, many people suffocated and died. On that day, Hiroshima died. What remained was only agony, wailing, and the smell of burning flesh. After the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, complete confusion gripped Japan's military leadership and the government in Tokyo. All communication with Hiroshima had been severed. Telephone and telegraph lines went dead. Radio stations fell silent. Officials in Tokyo only knew that something catastrophic had occurred in Hiroshima, but they had no concept of its true horror. A young military officer was dispatched to assess the situation. When he flew above Hiroshima and looked down, what he saw was beyond anything he could have imagined. A living, breathing city had been reduced to a vast, smoldering ruin, still glowing in places. In his report, he wrote only this: "The city of Hiroshima has been completely destroyed." But Japan's hardline military leaders still refused to accept this reality. They believed America had perhaps used some new but still conventional type of powerful bomb. They could not bring themselves to consider surrender. To them, the nation's honor was greater than human life itself. In America, meanwhile, President Harry Truman addressed the nation, announcing that the United States had dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. He warned Japan that if they did not surrender, a rain of destruction would fall upon their cities, the likes of which the world had never seen. But Japan's government made no response. They were hoping for an honorable settlement through the Soviet Union, not knowing that the Soviet Union was already preparing to declare war against them. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, despite his severe injuries, somehow boarded a train and headed toward his home city of Nagasaki. He wanted to return to his family. His entire body was wrapped in bandages, and the pain was unbearable. But he did not know that fate had something even more horrifying in store for him. American military commanders were preparing to drop the second atomic bomb. Their next target on the list was the city of Kokura, where Japan had a massive arsenal. Nagasaki was the alternative target. On August 9, 1945, another B-29 bomber, named Boxcar, carried the second atomic bomb, called Fat Man, into the skies over Japan. Fat Man was a different and more powerful device than Little Boy, a plutonium implosion device. The pilot was Major Charles Sweeney. When they arrived over Kokura, they found the city blanketed in clouds and smoke. After circling repeatedly, they failed to spot their target. Fuel was running low. Finally, Major Sweeney decided to turn the plane toward the alternate target, Nagasaki. By a grim twist of fate, Kokura was spared that day because of the clouds, and Nagasaki, which was not even the primary target, had stepped into the crosshairs of death. Nagasaki was one of Japan's most beautiful port cities. Nestled among hills, its Urakami Valley was the heart of Japan's Christian community and home to the largest cathedral in Asia, the Urakami Cathedral. The city also housed Mitsubishi's massive weapons and shipbuilding factories, an important target for the Allied forces. At 11:01 in the morning on August 9th, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was in his Nagasaki office describing to his manager the horror he had witnessed in Hiroshima. He was explaining how a single bomb could destroy an entire city. His boss was dismissing his words as the ravings of a madman. At that very moment, the window of the room blazed with an intense white light. Yamaguchi immediately threw himself to the ground. His experience in Hiroshima had taught him what to do. A split second later, the tremendous force of the explosion reduced everything in the room to chaos. Boxcar had also encountered heavy cloud cover over Nagasaki. But at the last moment, through a small break in the clouds, the crew spotted the city's industrial district. The pilot fixed the target and gave the order to release the bomb. At 11:02 in the morning, Fat Man detonated above the Urakami Valley of Nagasaki. Although Fat Man was more powerful than Little Boy, Nagasaki's geography, a valley surrounded by hills, somewhat contained the effects of the explosion. The destruction was largely confined to the Urakami Valley, but within that area, the devastation was even greater than in Hiroshima. Everything within 1 kilometer of the blast site was annihilated in an instant. The Urakami Cathedral, where many people had gathered that day in prayer, was obliterated. All of them perished. The historic cathedral was reduced to rubble. Mitsubishi's factories were leveled to the ground. An estimated 40,000 to 70,000 people died instantly.
Tsutomu Yamaguchi had survived once again, though this time other parts of his body were burned. He would go on to become the only person in the history of the world officially recognized as a survivor of both atomic bomb attacks. The scenes of destruction in Nagasaki were just as heartbreaking as in Hiroshima. Scorched bodies, people buried under rubble, and cries for help. 2 cities, within 3 days of each other, had been turned into laboratories of the atomic age. The second nuclear bombing of Nagasaki, combined with the Soviet Union's invasion of Manchuria on the same day, completely cornered Japan's military leadership. They understood that continuing the war meant the total annihilation of Japan. The Supreme War Council was torn by fierce disagreement. One faction of hardline military officers still vehemently opposed surrender, insisting on fighting to the last Japanese citizen alive. On the other side, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister understood that there was no option left but to stop. To break this deadlock, for the first time in history, Emperor Hirohito himself intervened. In Japanese culture, the emperor was regarded as equivalent to a deity. His word was the ultimate law. Emperor Hirohito summoned his ministers and told them, "We must endure the unendurable and pave the way for peace." August 15th, 1945. All across Japan, people gathered around their radios to witness a historic moment. For the first time ever in Japan, they were about to hear the voice of their emperor. In a trembling, formal tone, Emperor Hirohito read his surrender announcement, known as the Jewel Voice Broadcast. In his address, he made reference to the new and most cruel bomb used by the Allied powers, which was claiming the lives of innocent people, and expressed his conviction that if its use continued, human civilization itself would be destroyed. The announcement triggered mixed reactions across Japan. Many broke into tears. Some hardline military officers attempted a coup, failed, and took their own lives. But the majority of ordinary people breathed a sigh of relief. After a long, bloody, and devastating war, the end had finally come. On September 2nd, 1945, aboard the deck of the American warship USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay, Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu formally signed the Instrument of Surrender. With that signature, the Second World War officially came to an end. But the story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not end with the end of the war. A new and even more agonizing chapter had just begun. Those who had survived the bombings were known as hibakusha. For them, life was a living hell. Their bodies bore terrible wounds, burn scars, and keloid tissue. But more terrifying than the visible wounds was the invisible enemy, radiation. Under the influence of radiation, thousands of people died in the following months and years from cancer, leukemia, and various other unknown diseases. Children born to pregnant women came into the world with disabilities. The hibakusha also faced social discrimination.
Don't look at
People feared them and avoided them. No one wanted to marry into their families. They were believed to carry some contagious disease. To this day, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remains a subject of debate. One side argues that the bombing saved the lives of millions of American and Japanese soldiers and that the explosions brought a rapid end to the war. The other side contends that it was an inhumane war crime, that using such a devastating weapon against innocent civilian populations can never be justified, especially when Japan was already on the verge of surrender.
And yet, the story would not be complete without acknowledging what came after. Because Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like the mythical phoenix, rose again from the ashes. Today, these two cities have become global symbols of peace and nuclear disarmament. Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park and Nagasaki's Peace Park draw millions of visitors each year, reminding them of that terrible morning and the enduring necessity of peace.
Tsutomu Yamaguchi lived until 2010. He spent the rest of his life campaigning against nuclear weapons so that future generations would never have to face such horror. The story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki teaches us that the boundless power of science and technology can both serve and destroy humanity in a single moment. It reminds us of how the madness of war can drag human civilization to its absolute lowest point. The silent weeping of these two cities still drifts through the air, warning us forever. Never again. Never again.